Now that Danganronpa 2x2's announcement has been out for a while, I've had a lot of time to think over the most likely possibilities for the Death Order. Some of my biases as a writer and my preferences towards certain characters has influenced some of my predictions. I mean, it's hard to remove my opinions, especially when it comes to a franchise I love to death, but I tried to set aside my personal hopes for the game and think of how Kodaka would change the Death Order instead. I'm still hesitant to call all of my predictions likelihoods, so I categorized each prediction into 3 tiers based on how certain I am. The first tier will be deaths I think will most definitely happen. Second tier are ones I'm a bit iffy on. Then the third tier is when I merely have a bronze cross because of the lack of faith I have. To start off though, I am actually decently confident in how I assume the first case will play out. If you haven't watched my video on how I think the survivors will die, in short, I explained why I think Hajime will turn out to be the first victim. I think it makes the most sense to give this game a new protagonist since it gives the players a new experience in the trials, free time events, interactions with other characters, and overall just a new perspective in general. Considering Kodaka's writing, it's clear he isn't one to shy away from having an extreme twist in the first chapter. Raincode's first chapter shows that writing trope very prominently since everything thought to be established is flipped upside down. So I honestly feel pretty confident that Hajime will be the first victim, and although I don't have as much evidence to support my predictions for Hajime's culprit, I still am just as confident that Kazuichi will kill Hajime. I can't picture Kazuichi's character lasting long at all in the new scenario, and with how emotionally charged he is, it wouldn't be out of character for him to irrationally kill. The motive probably wouldn't push him that far though. Instead, I think what will trigger Kazuichi to kill is actually the event that causes Danganronpa 2x2's new scenario. A while back, Next Time commented their prediction for what could be the triggering event, and after thinking it over, I genuinely believe their theory could be right. They suggested that rather than Teruteru keeping Nagito's plan to kill a secret, he'd tell the cast about it. I've seen others comment on how the triggering event could be Togami revealing the threatening letter Nagito sent, but because Togami's character struggles so much with trusting others, I really doubt that this would be the route-altering scenario. Though even if that does end up being what causes the new scenario, my prediction for Kazuichi's death doesn't change. He'd still end up with the same realization that one of his classmates is willing to commit murder. From that, it could definitely lead his character to becoming paranoid and lead him to worry that he might be a victim if he doesn't do something. If Kazuichi is or isn't the first culprit, I still think the kill will happen on or around the new boat area revealed in the Danganronpa 2x2 trailer. Kazuichi could set up a trap within the boat, and Hajime just so happens to be the victim to his trap. Taking into consideration the new CG art of Hajime and Nagito, maybe Nagito's luck is what indirectly causes Hajime to be killed by this trap. Either way, however Chapter 1 plays out, I still do feel confident in saying that Chapter 1 will have Hajime die as the victim to Kazuichi's murder. For Chapter 2's victim though, I am much less certain on who it could be. At first, I thought maybe Mikan would die and her death would cause the despair disease to be a lot more of a threat. Believe me, I'd really like it if she were to die early on, but I just feel like her character has too much potential to die before Chapter 3. Who I can see dying early on is Chiaki. In the original story, she lived up until Chapter 5 and had a lot of screen time, so I think she'd die around the start of the game in order for other characters to get more love. As for who'd kill Chiaki, I have significantly more faith that my prediction of Fuyuhiko being Chapter 2's culprit will happen. I haven't seen anyone argue that Fuyuhiko has the slightest chance of surviving, because like Hajime and Chiaki, Fuyuhiko had his character arc, so without much more to explore in his character, it makes sense for him to die in Chapter 2. I personally put more weight into him being a culprit rather than a victim because Fuyuhiko's character has been already shown to irrationally kill. If Pekka wasn't there to stop him in the original game, he would have been the culprit. Plus, murdering is second nature to him. So with all of that to consider, I'm highly confident Fuyuhiko would be a culprit in Chapter 2. Why he would kill Chiaki though isn't what I'm certain of. Maybe he'd assume she knows something more about the motive because it relates to a video game, but again, I'm not all too sure Chiaki will die in Chapter 2 to begin with, so I wouldn't bet much on that being why Fuyuhiko would kill Chiaki. Moving on to Chapter 3, my prediction here is much more dependent on what the writers will do for Nekomaru, Teruteru, and Akane's characters. Like, I'm pretty sure Teruteru will get an arc, and I think what could trigger that is him having to accept that everyone's lives are on the line and that nobody is safe from the killing game. Understanding how fragile life is could help him learn to actually treat his classmates with respect, as he wouldn't want to make their final memories one of discomfort. This could lead him to looking over the despair disease victims in Chapter 3 and provide them with the same care he gave to his mom whenever she fell ill. Still, much of the cast would probably and hopefully be wary of Teruteru's intentions if he were to volunteer as a caretaker. So I can imagine Nekomaru could also be there to make sure Teruteru stays in line. From being around the patients so much, either Nekomaru or Teruteru could become afflicted by the the despair disease. But I more strongly believe that Nekomaru will be infected because Danganronpa 2x2 specifically is stated to have new victims and culprits. So if this applies to every single character, obviously Nekomaru can't be a victim again. I can't see Nekomaru's type of character surviving, and he also wouldn't kill unless his mind was physically altered, say by the despair disease. The despair disease gave the characters a trait that contrasts with their core personality. Like, Nagito is given the liar disease because he prides himself in never lying to the cast because they're all beacons of hope. Nekomaru could be infected with a disease that forces him to be anything but considerate, or he could revert to his ultimate despair form like how Mikan did. Whatever the case, I predict him getting infected will lead him to seek out Akane to kill her. If his disease forces him to be in ultimate despair again, he'd kill his closest friend for the sheer sake of despair. But if his disease blocks out all kindness in his actions, he'd kill Akane because of how cruel such a betrayal will be. Though, since Teruteru will be taking care of the patients alongside Nekomaru, I think Teruteru would actually try to stop Nekomaru before he can hurt Akane. Even if Teruteru would understand he has no fighting chance against Nekomaru, he'd still fight to save someone he promised to take care of. In the end, this would give him the best possible arc he could probably get. Now, everything that I've described here is very specific, and a prediction is most accurate when it isn't specific. Still, I honestly do feel confident that these will be the 3 deaths. Teruteru lasting any longer doesn't make sense considering his character. Akane is an original survivor, and her despair disease is bound to make her an easy target, so she has a good chance of dying at this point. And Nekomaru probably won't die again in Chapter 4, neither would he die in Chapter 5, simply because it'd be out of character for him to selfishly kill. So although I know the events leading up to Teruteru and Akane's deaths are very specific, it is still a scenario I can see being possible, and it is something I honestly hope will happen because of the nuance it gives Teruteru and Nekomaru's character. As having Nekomaru realize that he killed, more specifically killed his best friend, would do numbers for his underwritten character. Now to discuss Chapter 4, I actually really hope that my prediction's wrong because, oh my god, I'd be incapable of handling this case. But this is Kodaka we're talking about. If he was able to write V3 Chapter 1, I know damn well he wouldn't miss out on the opportunity to make Sonia and Gundam even more of a doomed ship. Originally, in my video discussing how the survivors will die, I said Sonia would likely be a victim, but I have come to realize how great and amazing of a culprit she'd make. Like, just the idea alone of an ultimate princess's execution is really intriguing. Not to mention her fascination with true crime as well. She could definitely frame the crime scene in a lot of ways to shift suspicion away from her. Plus, if I'm right about Sonia killing Gundam, I think Gundam would encourage her to go all out just to make his death unforgettable. In any other circumstance, Sonia killing Gundam, or Gundam encouraging her to kill, would be very out of character for them. Still, I stand by this prediction because of what Chapter 4's motive is. I went into much detail in my previous video, but to sum it up, Sonia would want to die fulfilling her duty as a princess by putting others' needs before her own. Gundam had a similar motive to kill in Chapter 4, murdering for the sake of everyone else to live on. So from that shared value, I believe Gundam and Sonia would agree to sacrifice themselves in order for everyone else to survive. If that were to happen, it raised the question of why Sonia wouldn't admit to killing Gundam. After all, everyone's lives are always at stake when they're in the trial. So if she wanted to protect her classmates' lives, why wouldn't she end the trial as soon as it begun? And I think the answer to that is that she'd be the one to complete the final dead room, not Nagito. Her and Gundam's mission is to give Gundam an unforgettable death, so utilizing the final dead room would help execute this hope of theirs. And of course, from that, Sonia would learn about their pasts as ultimate despairs. I believe this would make her conflicted, unsure if she should come clean and admit guilt to her class when they're just as guilty as her. Another internal conflict that prevent her from being honest is the fact that she'd have to accept that she killed Gundam. Her character deals with such tumultuous expectations to be perfect, so to admit to everyone that she succumbed to the motive is to acknowledge that she couldn't be perfect. I both dread the thought of this prediction being true and look forward to it because it has so much potential. Like, I think it could go down as one of the best Daganranronpa trials, but that's a matter of if this prediction turns out to be more than just a prediction. And personally, I see Sonia being a culprit in Chapter 4 as highly likely. I think Gundam's role as a victim could be interchangeable, as I can see his character surviving, but at the same time, I don't think he will. There's also the added fact that he'd be dying in Chapter 4 again, so I am just slightly more confident Sonia being a culprit won't be a missed opportunity. If it happens in Chapter 4 or not, I still believe with certainty that she will die as a culprit. Then finally, this leaves chapter 5. I'll be honest, I don't have much theories or predictions for how chapter 5 will play out because the original had no motive and the direction it took was run entirely by Nagito. I doubt they'd have Nagito's character reenact the same story beats, which is why I'm so unsure. So I looked over the characters I had left and ultimately went with the two characters I don't think will survive, Mikan and Mahiru. Because the characters probably won't repeat their roles as a victim or a culprit, that defaults Mikan to being a victim and Mahiru to a murderer. I think what would motivate Mahiru to specifically kill Mikan is if she knew about Mikan's role as an ultimate despair. Mikan was the pawn that brought down everyone else with her because of Junko's influence. Without Mikan, Chiaki never would have been executed in DR3, meaning Class 77B would have never been ultimate despairs. I think Mahiru would obtain this information through Chapter 5's motive. It's hard to predict what the motive will be, but I feel like it'd relate to the cast's roles as ultimate despairs, and the details of their roles are revealed through a secrets reveal type of scenario. To mix it up, the motive could work similarly to how SDRAs did in Chapter 2, where they receive a secret that isn't their own. Mahiru could receive Mikan's secret, revealing everything Mikan did when she was in ultimate despair. Not knowing the context of Mikan being brainwashed by Junko, Mahiru could see Mikan as a traitor and killer because of that. Another possible factor that would influence Mahiru to kill is that Mikan, being an ultimate nurse, is supposed to look out for others. Mahiru's mom did something similar where she took war photographs, looking out for everyone who's a victim of war by making sure their lives and stories weren't forgotten. Since Mahiru's mom had such a great impact on Mahiru's character, that could be the main reason why Mahiru kills Mikan, because Mikan used her ultimate to take advantage of people's trust. Whether or not Mahiru does kill Mikan, I think that her motive to kill will tie back to her backstory in some form. That's only if she does kill, however, as I wouldn't rule out the possibility of her being a survivor, so I'm only somewhat certain that Mahiru will be a culprit. And the same goes for Mikan. I can't say with certainty she'll die in Chapter 5. I absolutely think she'll be a victim at some point, but I'm not sure when. I could hope that she'll die in Chapter 1 and every chapter moving forward, but I fear denial only gets you so far. Now that the death order is out of the way, that just leaves my survivor predictions. First and foremost, it's important to note that I believe Nagito will take over the protagonist role, so of course, he'll be a survivor whether he likes that or not. I know that many people believe Mahiru will be a part of the protagonist switch, but I just personally feel like the writers will go with Nagito instead. And also just considering what the writers might do, I also think they'd have Hiyoko and Peko survive. I can see Peko being a victim in Chapter 5, but overall I'm pretty confident she, Hiyoko, and Nagito will be survivors. The last two I predict to survive are Tugami and Ibuki, two characters I'm less certain on living. In all honesty, I genuinely don't have much reasoning for Ibuki living. It's not impossible for the comedic relief to survive because Yasuhiro does, in fact, exist if you forgot. Outside of that though, there's not much to back up why I believe she'll survive. It's mostly just because I feel like she will. I had that intuition of her surviving when I played DR2, so hopefully that intuition was just me predicting the future. Though by far the character I want most to survive is Tugami, because their character has so much potential for growth. Like, they could learn to accept themselves for who they are and learn to put trust in others. I really want to see their character's potential be used to the fullest and just for them to be given a chance. I think Ibuki's character could definitely help them with this arc, as Ibuki doesn't struggle with being herself while Tugami does. It'd be really sweet to see them survive together. But whatever happens in DR2x2, I seriously hope beyond hope that Tugami ends up being a survivor, even if that is unlikely. That's all just my personal hopes and predictions for this upcoming game though, and I'll be happy with whatever ending the game gets. That's all for now. I just want to say, just thank you so much for the support of the last video. Like, I wasn't even expecting... I wasn't expecting it, period. Nothing more than that. I really wasn't, and I appreciate it so much. It was fun. Goodbye.